So Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is, of course, Muslim American, and he converted when he was younger. So he's right when he says every once in a while they're going to trot out famous Muslim Americans like me to apologize for all Muslims. And it's annoying. He's very right about that. But in the midst of explaining all that, he made a brilliant analogy about ISIS that I wanted to share with you guys. Let's watch.
When you can make parallels to things that have happened here in America, like the Ku Klux Klan saying that they are the Christian Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, and they do not practice Christianity, that any of us are familiar with. Right. And then you can see that any group can do this. There was an article in yesterday's New York Times about the First Crusade, and the first people that they sacked were Jews living in Europe. They devastated them, took all their wealth, and kept on their way to the Holy Land.
I don't know why I never thought of that before, but it's just such a great point by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar there. Saying ISIS represents all Muslims like saying KKK represents all Christians. They're an extreme group. They're a small minority, and it's absurd to think that they represent the entire religion. Now, I'm going to get to numbers on that in a second, but first, look, there's a very good reason to keep pointing this out, because there are people who are acting out against Muslims as we speak. Now, we don't know if the Chapel Hill shooting was definitively and specifically because those 3 people who were murdered were Muslims. Now, apparently, the guy who shot him had parking disputes with a lot of people, but he happened to shoot those 3, including not just the guy he had a dispute with, but his wife and his wife's sister. Okay, so that's one issue. Then, of course, there was the Islamic Center that was burnt outside of Houston. We got the guy who did it, Daryl Ferguson. And then, of course, people are like, oh, you don't know. Maybe he was a homeless man trying to get warm and happened to go into an Islamic center and burn it down while trying to get warm. Well, now we do kind of know, because he told a nearby convenience store clerk that he hated Muslims, they got what they deserved, and things happened for a reason. Okay, so, and then, of course, these cases go on and on. Now, what we did here to add on to Jabbar's analogy is crunch some numbers. Now, according to our National Counterterrorism Center, the number of people in ISIS is anywhere between 20,000 to 31,500. To be conservative, we took the highest number. We said, okay, let's give them all 31,500 people, okay? Then we did some interesting math. There's about 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. So let's find out what percentage of Muslims in the world belong to ISIS. Well, you look at this. 0.0019%. So when you hear people generalizing about Muslims or saying that all Muslims have to apologize anytime there's a bombing, remember that ISIS represents 0.0019% at most of the Muslims in the world. Now, Jabbar talked about the KKK. Now, of course, what a lot of people are going to say, oh, that's not fair comparison. The KKK is so much smaller than ISIS. Really? Actually, that's not remotely true. Back in the 1920s, when they were at their height and their power, they had 5 million members in the KKK. Now, what percentage of that was of the U.S. population at the time? In the 1920s, the U.S. population was 106 million people. The KKK, at the height of their power, when they were most clearly practicing terrorism throughout the land, burnings, lynchings, castrations, etc., was 4.7% of the entire population of the United States, and obviously a much greater percentage of the southern states. So KKK at their height was much larger percentage of Christians and Americans than ISIS is of Muslims. Now, would it have been fair to say at that time, that's it, all Christians must apologize for the KKK? Obviously, if you're a Christian, you're just like those guys who wear the crosses on their robes, who have signs that says Jesus saves, and that burn crosses. You must all be just like KKK. We have to take precautions. We have to do, further testing of Christians to make sure they're not in this extremist group. Sometimes we have to take preemptive action against Christians. Now, of course, nobody would have said that because Christians were in the majority here in America. But when it's a minority, it's much easier to say, oh, yeah, of course, Muslims, they're different, and we should watch out for them. So understand the reality. And we didn't make these numbers up. You can go look them up online, anywhere you like. Go to the library. They still exist. Look up the numbers on the KKK and our population. And it's our Counterterrorism Center and the CIA that gave us the numbers on ISIS. So that's stone cold reality.